on a Tuesday. The Amazing Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football and basketball. That's where we come at you and talk about the latest in Michigan sports. And today's no different. I like the things that we have to talk about today. Basketball, football, maybe a little hockey that we have in store for you. And you can guess on some of that, but you won't be able to guess. I'm guessing about football. And that is because I just picked two things randomly out that I was interested in and started researching them a little bit and looking at them a little bit more this morning. And then I thought I would bring it to you to see where you are at. We'll talk about two trends in college football. One going for it on fourth down, one going for it when you're in field goal range. We've seen a lot of this past year, and it's happening. You know, we've talked about it for years. They should do this, they should do that. Well, they're doing it now. What do we think of it? What do you think of Michigan specifically when it comes to going for it on fourth down and then going for it when they're in field goal range? We ask you that question. We also have an update on a star linebacker from out east that we talked about yesterday, but we'll start with Michigan basketball. And, you get to bracketology and, we're all sitting around and waiting until Thursday when Michigan plays at noon against Rutgers. The 8-9 matchup in Chicago. We all have our ideas and whether we're entrenched in, Joe Lenardi or Jerry Palm or whoever else you're looking at. I mean, they're not all the same. There's a little bit of variance there. That's why when you hear people say, oh, I only think they're already in. I haven't actually heard anybody say that, but I have heard some people, and we're going to get to some video coming up in just a minute saying that Michigan just needs one. I don't think that. I wouldn't hold my breath with that. I hope so. That would be great. I want Michigan to get into the NCAA tournament. But I think too, you're certainly feeling much better. You feel like you got a chance, and I think you're going to have to sweat it out on Sunday, but you maybe a coin flip, a little bit better than that if they win too. I know people automatically they're in. Maybe. And so maybe that's better than a coin flip. Maybe they're sitting there at 90%. I tend to think just about a coin flip with two, considering all the numbers that I've looked at. But if they, would win three, I would feel like, they would make that huge jump and get in there. Now, that's just how I look at it. Some experts were talking about specifically Michigan's chances. And I thought, well, let's hear what the experts have to say about the Wolverines' chances to make the NCAA.
Michigan is going to play essentially a play-in game against Rutgers in the first Big Ten tournament game it has. Then it gets a chance at Purdue. With 2 wins, Michigan will make the NCAA tournament. With 1 win, it will be close. But here's the thing, and I know this from being in a mock selection of the bracket. Late in the year, the committee will look at a team that's on the bubble and say, does that team look like an NCAA tournament team? If you're good enough to go to Illinois and you're good enough to go to Indiana and go to overtime, you're good enough to play in the NCAA tournament. Got to beat Rutgers.
So if you lose 2 games, so you get reported for one, you get rewarded for losing.
You don't get rewarded for anything.
Okay.
What I'm saying is this. The committee is going to look if they're debating teams and say, does this team look like an NCAA tournament?
I like what I just heard you say.
That's how UCLA got in with Steve Alford and went to the Sweet 16 years ago.
Great. But the fact that they're looking late in the season, because I think these late games in the year should matter more.
Yes. Michigan.
Okay, that was John Rothstein talking the most there. Thanks to CBS for that video and audio. So they're the experts. We can have our opinions, and we do, but they're guys. Rothstein is set in on some of those, whether it's the real NCAA tournament committee or whether he's a lot of the media, they put through some of these mock selections over the years and let them go through the process. I don't know which one he was talking about there, but he's kind of close to it. If you follow that guy, that's all he does. He's just like immersed in college basketball. And I remember when Jay Wright was doing the one Michigan game this year, and there was one point in the second half where he said, Michigan looks. It was against Ohio State, I think. He said, Michigan looks like an NCAA tournament team. And there's Rothstein talking about even in the 2 losses that they looked like an NCAA tournament team. Well, you have to have a lot of things going for you, but you hear guys that are involved in whether it's the selection process or a coach in there and talking about the eye test and how Michigan looks when it comes down if they're one of the best 64, 68 teams. And so, maybe, as we sit here, I think if you want to say that, now today's the day or, tomorrow's the day, Thursday, until they tip it off, it's grasping at straws time. Okay, I'm grasping. But these are the guys that they're not just saying it, just to say it. There wasn't everybody was in agreement there, but the part about how you look late in the season or how you look, the eye test, Michigan's brand, So we have talked about that over the years. We've talked about that specifically right here when it comes down to Michigan. So that's just I would say the latest. That is something. When it comes down to Michigan, maybe they only need that game on Thursday and they'll be able to punch their ticket. Wouldn't that be something if they just got in by winning this one? Like I said, whatever you feel about it, however I feel about it, that's how they feel about it. That's how Rothstein felt about it. One little measly win, and we could be talking about them getting in. That'd be nice to see that. We'll see how it ends up shaking out. Now, I want to tell everybody about what I want to get to when it comes to college football. Where's everybody at? I know it's basketball time. Hey, it's exciting. People want to hear about football, but it's time to talk about football, and it's also time to join up with the Maize and Blue Review, recruiting, football talk. All day, all night, certainly basketball, analyzing the situation where they're at right now, heading into the Big Ten tournament. Join the Maize and Blue Review today. Go to michigan.rivals.com. There is a deal going on right now that I saw that you can check out when you go there. And, who doesn't like a deal? Most everyone, especially my mom. She loves a great deal. What everybody else loves around here is football. And there have been two trends in football that we've talked about for years. And one of them is people are like, I'd like to see teams go for it more on fourth down. Over the years, 10, 20, 30 years, you're at a football game, you see a team, it's 4th and 1, everybody's like, go. And then, whoever it is will, bring the punt team on, boo. But certainly in the last 5 years, and even more in the last 3, and even more last year, teams, I don't watch much high school football. I'm going to change that coming up, try to watch a little bit more high school football, but certainly in the college game and the pro game, teams are going for it more than they have ever gone for it on fourth down. And Michigan specifically, they go for it. Michigan has gone for it a few times in big games on their own side of the 50, on their own side of the 40. So even a 4th and a foot, and sometimes it gets, I know we haven't spent too much time on it. Michigan wins, and it's in the first half or the first drive of the second half, and they're on their own 39 or something, and it's 6 inches. Nobody ever would have gone for that. I remember, I don't know how many, maybe it was 20 years ago. I guess I could probably figure it out because it was the Colts taking on the Patriots. I don't even think it was a playoff game, but it was like the Pats were on their own 35, but they had a foot to go. Maybe it was a little bit more than that, but they went for it. Everybody's like, only Belichick can do this because if it was anybody else, they'd get fired. And, Belichick went for it. Not everybody else was doing that. But the more of the offensive explosion, the more that teams have, value having the ball and being able to move the ball in field position like it used to be back when I started watching football. If you had the ball inside your own 10, you might as well go to the kitchen and get a drink and, go out in the yard and rake some leaves. You can come back because you knew the team was just going to run the ball and punt. And certainly if the team was inside their 5 or they were taking snaps in their own end zone, a couple sneaks up the middle just to give yourself some room where you can punt. But almost all teams in in pro, in college now. They can be out in their own end zone. They're throwing. I mean, they'll throw it deep, they're throwing short, they're throwing out of their own end zone. That's I say relatively new. It is relatively new. Teams throwing out of their own end zone. So I ask if you like that, Michigan going for it as much as they do. I've always thought that if you have the center and you have a quarterback that's on the same page, that you could almost anywhere on the field, if you're talking about 6 inches, 12 a foot, that you can almost always, even though you're putting yourself at the mercy of the spot of the judge, but being able to get up behind your center. Tom Brady is the best ever. Jumping to the right, jumping to the left, or what we see now in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts is the strongest quarterback ever in my mind, seeing what he's able to squat and everything. And they have a Hall of Fame center in Kelsey. So strongest quarterback, Hall of Fame center, 2 very important things. Everybody's like, why don't you just do what Philly does? Well, it's more than just lining up and going ahead and doing the Bush push. I mean, you've got 2 components there that no other teams have. But looking into that and seeing what kind of success, if you have that kind of center, if you have that kind of strength under center, and then if you get in there and do some Bush push, or I don't know. I think Tom Brady probably practices being able to wiggle in there and find the space. I mean, it's not like he's the strongest guy, biggest guy, but he's a pretty smart guy, and understanding the cadence and when to go and how to get that sneak in there. I like it. I like going for it on 4th down. I mean, even 4th and 6 from the 50, go for it. I'm in. Defenses, and it speaks as much to, just where you're at with defense, just how the other teams are playing. Like, you end up, let's say you give up the ball at the 50, you punt it and you pick up 30 yards. The way teams are able to drive the ball right now, and the way they're throwing it down the field, 2 plays later, they're back at the 50 anyways. In defense, it's not like it was, again, 10, 20 years ago, where you're thinking about keeping the team under 10 points. You're thinking about having a dominating defense. You think about just not hanging on. You think about being able to just make a play or 2 in the 4th quarter where you can survive as a defense. And, there's probably people that are watching this that are, maybe, I don't know, inclined defensively, played defense. Defensive coaches are like, oh my God, he's talking about just surviving. That's kind of football now. You can give up 300-400 yards, but if you come down there, you can get a key stop, get a key turnover in the 4th quarter. Sure. Everybody would like some kind of steel curtain, or the 2000 Ravens, the 85 Bears, the 97 Michigan defense, the 85 Michigan defense, the 76 Michigan defense. Hey, maybe the 2022 or 2022 defense was pretty good for Michigan statistically. They were up there, but I like that more. I want to see what the people are thinking about that when it comes down to defense. And I got a couple more things that I wanted to say before I read the feedback, which is going to be pretty quick. But going for it on 4th down, I looked up some of the numbers. I was watching some video this morning. Would you be surprised if I told you that Michigan went for it 21 times this past season on 4th down, and they made it 81% of the time, 17 out of 21. That's a pretty good clip, 81% of the time. And you could see heading into the college football semis, Michigan was 0 for 2. Their first series and their last series, they went for it on 4th down. They ended up 0 for 2 in the game. One, I know you'll remember both of the plays. But so heading into the semifinal, Michigan was damn near 90% on 4th downs. That's why Harbaugh, I think, got down to the 2-yard line and said, man, we've been so good in short yardage situations. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. That where the infamous Philly not so special on Michigan's, it says there should be a comma here. The Philly special, comma, last series of the game. The Philly special may have been special if TCU was in man-to-man, but they were in zone, Michigan should have audibled out of the Philly special. Meanwhile, they played right into TCU's hands. And not only did they not make a touchdown and convert the 4th and 2, but they lost 8 yards and weren't able to pin TCU back to their own goal line for the first series. So that thing just completely blew up. You remember the Philly special, and then the last series of the game, you remember as well. It was a 4th and 10 from their own 25. There's 35 seconds left. I just watched the play again today. JJ, whether he didn't realize that the snap was coming from Olotimi or whether it was too low, he fumbles the snap. It looks like it hits him in the shin, and then it's down in a mess, and you can't even see the ball. And then Ryan Hayes picks it up. He laterals it back to Donovan Edwards, who starts to run, but he's pinned in, and he's basically falling down. He doesn't touch his knee. It was a good job by the one-armed bandit who just kind of flips it forward. Flips it forward to Colston Loveland, who is gang tackled, like right at the line of scrimmage. But upon further review, and they stop it and you look at it, there's no question that TCU targets Loveland. The guy comes right in with the crown of his helmet, right in on Loveland's head, which, you watch 100 football games and 100 targeting, everybody up in the booth, everybody watching it says, yes, that's the head and neck area. That's the crown of the helmet. Except that it was the last play of the game, and the announcers on the game like, oh, this is getting too far right at the end of the game. That's what the guys were saying, that whoever the announcers were, for the Fiesta Bowl, that, you do that in sports. It gets down right at the end like, oh, don't let the refs interfere with what's going on here. Michigan should have got the ball, we all know, with 15 yards up to the 40 with, 25 seconds left. Now, would they have been able to, get 20 or 30 yards, stop the clock? They might have had a shot at a 30, certainly maybe 40-yard Hail Mary or play, maybe 2. Maybe, you say stranger things, but it would have been down to one of those, crazier or stranger things that would happen. It would have been a miracle, but, miracles have happened against Michigan. So, but that's just thinking about Michigan was really good. I just went to the one game. I should have gone through all of the games. I kind of felt like Michigan went for it on 4th down in the first game with Cade McNamara, and he ended up throwing an interception. I think I didn't go back and check all those. Those were off the top of my head, which then would have only made one more that they didn't make. I mean, they made 17 out of 19 heading into the college football semifinal. So they had a lot of success. They were really good on 4th down, except against TCU, where a lot of things went wrong against TCU. You remember the 5 big plays. One of them was the Philly special, which was a 4th down. Another one was the fumble at the goal line. That was also in the first half. Then the 2 pick sixes, and then the last one, the 5 plays, where if Michigan makes any of them, the 5 big plays in the semifinal was that Quentin Johnston 76-yard catch and run on that 3rd and 7 in a 3-point game. Michigan's going to win a game. I think if they make any of those plays in that one, and still TCU was a pretty good team in all of that. So those are my thoughts on going for it, thinking about it and everything. Richard just thrown a prediction out for 2024. Now we get the 2023 season, but maybe he's talking about getting into 2024 when actually the national championship game is played, because he's then putting 15-0 out here. Hey, either one. But I think people are looking to this next season. I like that the offseason, and this reminds me, maybe this is a little nostalgic Tuesday, like going back in the day. Back when I was growing up, it always felt like Michigan had a chance to go undefeated. And people would say it. What do you think Michigan's going to do? Undefeated. And you wouldn't really, you'd say, oh, wow, that's, doesn't happen very often. But people would be like, I do too. And really, almost my entire life up until 2008, up until the 2007 season, it mostly came down to, there were a few seasons, 84, maybe just 84, that most of the seasons, even when Michigan had 4 losses, it still just came down to a handful of plays in a season where you felt like they could have been undefeated. Handful of plays, even in those 4-loss seasons. Now, maybe you can look back in 2007, where they lost to Appy State. Of course, that was one play, but the next game against Oregon, that was not a one-play game. That was like maybe a 10-play game. And of course, you could go back to 98. And while Michigan got beat pretty good by Notre Dame in the first game, the next game against Donovan McNabb, that game was not close. Oh, whatever. Maybe it's not. Oh, maybe there's more than 5 plays. But a lot of those seasons, it felt like, hey, you give me 5 plays, I'll give you an undefeated season. But I can tell you about the 98 Syracuse game with Donovan McNabb at Michigan Stadium. Tom Brady didn't say it up on the podium, and I don't think Lloyd Carr went to it either. But they made sure behind the scenes that if you go back in the first quarter and Brady gets picked at around the Syracuse 30, and I don't know if it goes for a pick 6, but he definitely gets picked. But if you go back and watch, and you could say, hey, that's a very pivotal part of the game. If you go back and watch that play, the Syracuse player grabs the Michigan wide receiver, basically pulls him and stands in front of him and gets the pick. Should have been pass interference. Michigan would have been getting the ball in Syracuse territory in a closer game. Instead it went the other way. And then, you can always say, trying to blame the refs in a, 30-point loss or something. But, Michigan was really frustrated about that particular play. Brady was, for sure. Although he didn't get out there, to his credit, and cry about it. And even Carr, I know he gets blamed a lot for, crying about, I don't think Carr was out there crying about that play. He might not have seen it until later, but there you go. Richard doesn't know what the stats are, but I'm usually in favor of taking the points. And now that flips us over to, going for it on 4th down. I'm mostly in favor of going for it. But then you get to a certain point where you're in field goal range, and then it changes. And this is where I change, Richard. I like going for it on 4th down in almost any situation. Almost any situation out there, I like going for it. Until you get into a spot where you're in field goal range. And where you're at, I think to me, it's a feel. Like, there's not just some chart to say, well, we made it down to the 10-yard line, we should be going for it. No, I think you got the time, you got the score, where your team's at. You got to know your team, momentum. In the NFL, and it is changing. Teams get down there, and they used to always like, hey, it's the first drive, take the points. It's almost like, you just know it, you do it. But teams are not doing that anymore. The Lions are not doing that anymore. The Lions get down there, they're eschewing the 3 points. We're going to go for it. And it feels like a mistake a lot of the times when I see it in the NFL. NFL's doing it a lot more. Like, they got their analytics that are dialing up, and, hey, we've got a 0.3% chance more. They come up with that, and they're like, oh, that's the right choice. That does not take into account, like, if you're playing a video game or you're just playing the game on a spreadsheet, and you're looking at the numbers, you say, well, if it all plays out, if you had 1,000 plays here, the call, because you have a 0.03% chance more, you should go for it. So that's what they come up with. That's why they do that. Even in the NFL, those guys are human. I can recall Gary Danielson, who played for the Lions and played quarterback at Purdue. He's the CBS announcer on the SEC games. Does a good job. But he had a radio show in Detroit for a couple of years. And Gary, knows everything. Just ask him. But it would come down to Gary would talk about that he didn't believe in momentum at all as a quarterback. It was like whatever the play was before, it wasn't going to factor in what happened with him. Now, Gary, if he was a coach, I think he would pull all the spreadsheets up and say, yeah, well, we're going to go with what the math says. The thing about Gary, he's different than most people. Most people, like, there is a feeling with momentum and getting in a rhythm and the team feeling like they've got something going. And, Gary felt like, you always hear this with cornerbacks, you got to have a short memory. You got to wait till the next play. Easier said than done. Look at Michigan with Joey Baker. Joey Baker airballed that last play against Illinois in double overtime to take it to triple overtime. The Michigan coaching staff wouldn't put him in key situations in the next game against Indiana when they needed a shooter. You don't think they were just like, forget about it? Because the percentages where Baker was percentage-wise of shooting a three was much better than actually anybody out on the floor. Maybe save Jet. Much better than Terrace Reed. Would you rather have Joey Baker, shooting a three, or Terrace Reed, offensive rebounding, whatever? But you can understand. I understood. Michigan didn't want to put Terrence Williams II out there because they don't feel really good about him shooting either. And Baker, they must have felt that he was just a total self-check and that they just couldn't go to him anymore because they felt like it was mental. And in football, I think a lot of times these coaches get down there or they bring in these, okay, I'll call them a bunch of nerds that are just like, you have 0.1% more of winning this game in the first quarter from the 7-yard line if you go for it on a 4th and 4 rather than kick the field goal. Like, hey, I'll take the points here, you nerd. And how many times do you see now? There's one time I usually don't agree with this, but you see it a lot. Teams like that are just there to get the check, and they're getting blown out 30-0, and then their second half. What do coaches do? Hey, kick the field goal because they don't want to get shut out. But because it's mental. There's a mental component. It's a pretty big part of the game. And it doesn't factor in. And this is where the nerds, and I love metrics. I like it. I enjoy listening to the people that are really good at all of the numbers and being able to tell you like, hey, well, it's a different way to look at it. I enjoy it. But they don't. The problem with the nerds is they only use the math and they don't understand what it's like. And probably none of those guys have ever had their hand in the dirt. They might have played a video game, but they don't even know they don't even know how to throw a football. And I know that doesn't matter when it comes down to the numbers, but not being able to put in the human element. I'm like Richard. I'm in favor of taking the points a lot of the times. Andres thinks Michigan should be going for it on 4th every time across the 50 and under 4th and 3. So you don't want to take any points, though, Andres. I think almost, I would say that across your own 40 under 4th and 3, I like it. But you're getting into a situation, and you got to know your field goal when you got Jake Moody who could kick 55, 50, 45 yarders with his eyes closed. But when you're getting down where, you're close to the red zone and it's 4th and 3, I'm going to be not every time. So this is the thing. This is one of the problems when you say every time. I think you should include almost every time, except when you feel like 3 points is really going to help your football team out mentally. AM zeroing in more on his statement. He thinks Michigan is using those 4th and inches and 4th and 1 opportunities to take shots at the end zone on hard play action fakes. Well, I'm not down with, and I know it worked against Notre Dame in in 91 with Desmond Howard and Elvis Gerbach. That was a 4th and 1. I think, 3rd and inches, 3rd and 1, I'm in with you on the idea of a play action fake. 4th and inches, let me go ahead and get the first down. 4th and 1, I know, again, Desmond Howard, it's one of the most famous plays in Michigan history, but I'm certainly more inclined to just go for it in a situation like that and take some shots on a 4th and 1 that I am 4th and inches. If that makes sense to you, Andres. Otis chiming in says, will Michigan replace some of those SEC teams getting those rings? It would be great for all of college football. Let me think if I am understanding this. Will Michigan replace some of those SEC teams getting those rings? You mean, is Michigan going to win a national championship? Is that what you're saying? Hopefully. Yes, I would like to see Michigan. I would like to see Michigan replace Georgia next year, the SEC team that's getting all those rings the last 2 years, and Michigan replacing the SEC with the representative of the Big Ten and getting the rings. I'm right with you, Otis. It would be great for college football. It'd be great for Michigan, but overall too, it would be great for college football. Richard is talking about replacing our kicker, so it's imperative that we get first downs this season. Well, it gets back to when you have the layup city for the non-conference. You're going to want Michigan to be in a couple field goal situations to see how whoever it's going to be. You have Tommy Duman, who is he's been around a couple years. I'm sure they know what he can do. I mean, he's been kicking he's a junior, so he's been around. I was looking at Duman's a pretty big, he was a place kicker and a punter, so I'm not 100% sure if they've narrowed it in. When you just look at him, you would say, oh, he's a punter, because he's 6'4". And there's not many. Mostly when I think place kickers, I think 6 feet tall or under, guys coming out there more compact, not as much that they have to deal with when you're talking about swinging that leg and Duman. But that's just that's prejudice by me. I'll admit that. And yet there are kickers in the pros that are more than 6'2", 6'3", even 6'4". It's my man's name at Kansas City. How is that, Hauschka? No, Stephen Hauschka. No, I guess I'd have to look it up. Maybe somebody could look it up for me. I know it. I think it starts with an H. Hans. Got a Butker. Harrison Butker. I'm going to go with Harrison Butker. Harrison Butker is 6'4" for Kansas City, and he's a pretty good kicker. And there are a couple other guys that are up there 6'3" currently in the pros, but Butker is the tallest, and Duman is 6'4". So, it's not unprecedented that you have some, monster back there that could do the place kicking. And if it's not going to be him coming in, you're talking about true freshman. Adam Samaha out of River Rouge, who is, he's got a stick of dynamite in his right leg. I mean, he looks like everything that you would want in a kicker. Scholarship. He went to the Corn Blue kicking camp and came out with glowing returns there. Michigan also, if you're looking, they brought a walk-on in, a preferred walk-on in Cordell Jones McNally. And preferred walk-ons when it comes down to place kickers, you never know. Jake Moody was a preferred walk-on. Remember, Quinn Nordine was like I think he was the number one kicker. He was the sleepover kicker that Harbaugh got. And then Jake Moody was a preferred walk-on, or just a walk-on. I don't know. I'll say preferred walk-on from Northville. But at one point, you had Moody taking over for the sleepover Nordine, and you're like, wow. Does Harbaugh know what he's doing here? Well, yeah, Harbaugh knew what he was doing when it came down to Moody and Nordine. Moody ended up being the greatest field goal kicker in Michigan history. So, what we're sitting here talking about. Scott weighing in. We once thought Jawan was going to get players that JB couldn't get. T. Will, Barnes, Glenn, Cheddar were all ranked nationally and still can't play. Well, that's it. I mean, the Beeline had a special talent at identifying guys across the country that was going to fit his system and just be able to evolve into guys that could contribute. And I hear you, going down the line on these guys. That's been a disappointment. It has. And it flips pretty quick because I remember the first year, Michigan went out, hit the transfer portal. They got Shawnee Brown and Mike Smith. Jackpot. They're out there. Jawan was able to convince Franz Wagner to stay, with Michigan. He got Dickinson, and you're like, this staff and these coaches, man, when it comes down, they know what they're doing. And then the next year, Jawan, last year, got 2 5-stars, a top 10 guy, Caleb Houston, a shooter, exactly what you would want in college basketball. You say, I want a 5-star, one of the best players in the nation, and somebody that is a volume 3 shooter. Boom, here's Caleb Houston. He wasn't that. Moussa Diabate, top 25 guy, 5-star. 5 stars, 5 stars. I mean, some of them come in, thrive, and are great. Others just go ahead and they're not what you thought. And then the worst part is, then they jump to the pros. Oh, I hear you. I could sit around, and I think we have, talking about where this is going wrong. And yet here we are still with a chance in talking about if Michigan just beats Rutgers, that they could still potentially get into the tournament and still have a good season. Last year was a lot like this year. Right at the end, there were the markings like, this is not going well. And then they got in. Doesn't matter if you can get all that talent if you can't develop it into a skill. Well, the guys that were mentioned there, but, you can also say that Juwan Howard did a nice job developing players. Well, he developed, who was Big Country? Austin Davis. He developed Franz Wagner. People are like, those guys would have been great anyways. I don't know. You can't play that game. You could try, but, you can't play that game. Hunter Dickinson. But overall, there has been an issue with those guys just in here. Most of them are listed not being usable in a game. I would add on to this list Jace Howard. Although the Beeline could have gotten Jace Howard. Nobody in the Power 5 was really going after him, but that's for another podcast. If you've gone back, I don't hammer on that. I mentioned it, but there it is. What are the stats on going for it nowadays? Well, it depends where you're at. Like you're asking me for the stats. 4th and 1, it's about 50%. 4th and 2, or it's a little bit above 50%. 4th and 2, it's a little bit right at 50%. And then you go back, it's, the percentages go down. And then it depends where you're at on the. I don't know if they break it down. They probably do on where you're at on the field. Those statistics are, it's funny when you look in, Richard, it's a pretty easy question, but a benign question that you ask. And yet, we could sit here and we could just talk about the stats on going for it for days. And there's sites. Football Outsiders is one. Pro Football Focus, is the other. These are premium sites where they have their guys and they dissect every inch of the field and have their own numbers, and then they put it in their own little formulas and stuff too. But if you're just doing the research yourself, like you could look into what was the average for NFL teams on 4th and 1 last year, You probably can't find it. They do a good job of blocking the year before, but you probably get something from like 2019, and it'll say 4th and 1, 52% of NFL teams, or and it's pretty similar in the college games. Just saying you don't get the up to date ones because there's so many sites that like use and mine that information for their premium statistics, and hey, they're doing the work and everything else. How they're able to keep it all from you could probably find it yourself, but it depends specifically what you're looking for every situation. Obviously, Richard, that you were able to come up with the stat on going for it nowadays. The stat that I came up, I did look, Michigan, I was surprised a little bit. They were 17 of 21. So I would have to break down each conversion on where they were at. 17 of 19 heading into the semifinal. I can think about some of the famous or ones that come to mind easily from last year. The Khalil Mullings against Ohio State, the jump pass, that was a 4th and short, 4th and 1, 4th and 2. The Philly special that Michigan missed was a 4th and 2, a 4th and goal from the 2. The last play of the game was a 4th and 10 from their own 25. That's going to be specific about, where you're at and what you're talking about, where you're going into it. Somewhat of a loaded question. Scott likes going for it on 4th, but please, no more Philly special. I don't think you're going to see the Philly special anymore for Michigan. AM says analytics have made coaches go for it consistently more on short yardage situations, regardless of field position. I think this is half true. They do feel like they should go for it more because they look at just how the starting position and what offenses generally get from each offensive possession and the risk reward of going for it on a 4th and 2 from your own 50 rather than punting it, thinking, hey, you get the 2 yards, you get a new set of downs, you punt it. Sure, you might be able to pin them back to the 5, but it might be coming out to the 22. But I wouldn't say regardless of field position. I do think once you get over the 40, and certainly when you're getting close to midfield, the analytics are telling the coaches to go for it more, and they are going for it more. Almost everybody. Maybe not Iowa. They're not going for it anymore. Richard liked Michigan's chances. Riley, why am I bringing up the bad memories of the semifinal? I know, I'm not going to dwell on it every day. It's like sometimes you have to go through it. Andre saying that Olu snapped that ball early. Yeah, I think that's probably what happened. When you look at it, Otis did not calling it criminal, the non-targeting. Michigan should have had the chance. You're right. I mean, if it was close, I can actually understand them, not, looking at it, but then saying, hey, the game's pretty much over. But that was I don't know if they have textbook targeting, but that was like clear video evidence of exactly, whatever it says. If it says the definition of targeting is using the crown or lowering your helmet in the neck and head area of a carrier, of a receiver. That's exactly what happened. I mean, you can't even make it. It was both the crown and it was it was targeting. Teams are going for it a lot more in that situation once it's past the 30s. Yeah, well, they are. I like to see a little bit more, sometimes the points. I think it's more of a feel. I think they rely too much on the numbers and not enough on the feel. Scott making the point that Michigan needs to develop a short yardage power back who isn't a linebacker. Yeah, I think Michigan has the best short yardage back in the country right now in Blake Corum. I've seen enough. In the year before, they had the best short yardage back in the country in Hassan Haskins. Like, I feel really good about Blake Corum being able to pick up a 4th and 1, especially with this offensive line. And the same thing with Haskins. I get, how much you weigh and, the whole thing, about physics and all of that. Developing a short yardage power back. Give me a great back. I would rather just have a great back in Blake Corum. I think a little bit, Scott, I understand what you're saying, but I think there's a little bit too much to this power back stuff. No, a good back should be able to pick up a 4th and 1. Good team should be able to pick up a 4th and 1. And Blake Corum is good at it. He knows how to tuck, get himself small, get himself skinny, find that hole. He knows how to where to cut. I would rather have Blake Corum than some, 255, 5-pound fullback or something. Well, this is a good one. Good afternoon. It's old Brandon Justice. I haven't talked to him in a long time. I did see him commenting on some of the plays against Indiana on Sunday on Twitter. Justice was tweeting away. It was good stuff. Justice, what do you think about the analytics of going for it on 4th and 1 or 4th and short? What do you think about not kicking field goals? Those are some of the things that we're talking about it right now. Let's see what some others have to say when it comes down to it. Richard and Andres are all over the conversation. Scott feels like we have great kickers on our roster. Justice, again, look at this. Dooman is an All-American if he lives up to his ceiling. Well, Justice, is he going to be a punter or is he going to be a place kicker? Scott, I'm with you on this. Scott wants to see the Lions go with Moody. I do too. Scott says Nordine was pretty good at Michigan. He was. I think with the whole sleepover and in the Rocket Leg, you felt like maybe Nordine was going to be Moody and maybe Moody was going to be Nordine kind of thing. I think, but I'm with you. Ooh, Scott. Not bringing the positive vibes. Well, why would you say that, Scott? I mean, like Rutgers is kind of fading themselves. And Michigan is actually playing pretty well, save, the last couple seconds of these games in overtime. So if we're just looking at, and then Michigan went into the, see if I can get this right. What sub shop is it? They went into the Yak, it used to be called. They went into the Jersey Mike Arena and served up a salami sandwich to Rutgers. So I don't know, Scott. I mean, you're just upset that Michigan lost, and people do this. They don't want to put their heart into it. So if you go ahead and predict an ass kicking by the other team, even though when it doesn't point to that. Now, if you said, I predict Michigan to be up by double digits with 10 minutes to go, but then Rutgers to win on a final second shot in overtime, I'd say, I know exactly what you're talking about there. But Scott, this one, I'm going to have to really disagree with your at right there. I don't believe that. Andre says Corum knows how to get those dirty yards. He doesn't run through guys, but he can find the crease. Well said, Andres. Back to basketball. Let's face it. Howard has not produced a cohesive team this year. Yeah, I mean, there's enough. The season's over. The regular season's over. The data is in. And yet here we are. There have been a lot of teams in the history of college basketball that have been in this position and yet have still gone on to do special things. Now, am I predicting that for Michigan? I'm not talking about special things. I don't want to sound like Juwan Howard here either. Hey, what do you think about Michigan's tournament chances? I'm just focused on Rutgers. No, I'm focused on more. I'm focused on Purdue as well. I think that Michigan can beat Rutgers. I like this Michigan team. I do think that Juwan Howard deserves to be criticized when you have 5, 6, 7 games with the leads that they had and the ability to not punch through and get victories in almost any of those games besides Whiskey and Minnesota, and then lose the 6 or 7 other ones. You really can't. You could be Juwan Howard's best friend. You'd have to say, he's got to wear that. It's the stamp. They haven't been able to make the plays in big games, enough big plays to win enough games to get them in. And yet, I feel like they are one shot away from being a pretty good team. And if you're that close, I know close doesn't count in college basketball, and it doesn't count with Michigan. But I feel like they're pretty close to being a pretty good team. I still feel like that. That Purdue game is favorable if Michigan wins it, that they're in. Otherwise, I'd say that they need 3. Yeah, look. You must be joining us a little late. We went through the win 1, win 2, win 3 scenarios, and I understand what you're talking about. We've also talked about going for it on 4th down, going for it instead of kicking field goals, and where you're at with those situations and what comes to mind. And it's been a fun talk. Now, you have joined us for the football and basketball talk. How about some recruiting? How about a forecast that's forthcoming for AC to U of M? There's a picture of AC, pink gloves. I like the armband usage here for the linebacker out of Maryland. And as I was looking today, I told you yesterday that the up arrow can't be any bigger for Michigan and Aaron Chiles, the 6'3", 220-pound outside linebacker from Good Counsel in Olney, Maryland. Michigan is in a great spot. And if you look, a 5'9", you like that. Nationally, Michigan has not done well since NIL, sorry to bring that up, with top 100 players. Chiles is almost a top 50 player. So this is a big player for Michigan to be able to get. And you continue to hear good things about Michigan and Aaron Chiles. I was doing some work on Chiles this morning. And I saw that on the high school website of Good Counsel, where Chiles goes to school, that they have produced a lot of NFL talent through the years. Guys that I've certainly heard of, Jelani Jenkins, Kendall Fuller. And how about Stephon Diggs? Stephon Diggs from the same high school as Aaron Chiles. So Michigan, a good program. Produced an outstanding player in Diggs, and we know that Michigan is all over Chiles, and they look pretty good for his services. Things are looking up. I want to get to one clarification. Michigan is the 2 seed in hockey in the Big Ten tournament. They swept Whiskey over the weekend, and now they're on to the semis against Ohio State. I was saying, the Big Ten is about 10 years old in college hockey. It used to be the CCHA, and I had erroneously said that Michigan had never won the Big Ten tournament. What I meant to say is they had never won the regular season in the Big Ten. That is true. They won the Big Ten tournament as recently as last year, and they won it one other time. but they have never won, and that stayed true this year. Minnesota won the regular season, so Michigan still has not won the regular season since the Big Ten has been put together, but they have won the Big Ten tournament. So they got that going for them, and I'm always looking for the correct information. When I say something, you could probably go through each show. It'd be nice if I had a clarifier sitting right there, and a producer checking every single thing that I said, saying you're wrong there, you're right there. Here's a clarification. Let's get it in. And also, he could have been looking for Harrison Butker's name, so it wouldn't take 5 minutes to figure out what the kicker was for Kansas City. Maybe he would have done some research and been able to give Richard some numbers on 4th and 1s in college football over the last year, 2 years, 5 years, and I'd have been able to put those numbers up for you as well. As it is, I had a lot of fun talking about football and going for it on 4th down and going for it instead of kicking footballs. In that same vein, well, certainly if anything develops overnight with Michigan and what the experts are saying about the Wolverines possibly just needing that win against Rutgers, we'll bring that to you. But also football, think about it. Somebody said no more Philly special. I already mentioned the jump pass with Khalil Mellings against Ohio State. Trick plays for Michigan and in college football. There seem to be more of them. Michigan, been known to go into the bag, the trick, the gadget bag, and pull some out. What works? What doesn't? What you'd like to see more of when Michigan goes into their bag, the trick play bag, and what you would rather see them just leave with the Philly special. That is what we'll be talking about tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you over on the Den on the Maize and Blue Review, at the Maize and Blue Review.